All right, so let's get to the moment we've all been waiting for.
Oh Lord, kill me now.
Last week, there was the second episode of
The
Dark Side of the Ring.
it was a 2 hour premiere um of season two of Dark Side of the Ring, and it was the first two episodes, the Benoit tragedy, the Chris Benoit tragedy. For those who don't know, in 2007, um, the bodies of Chris Benoit, Nancy Benoit, and their child, young child, Daniel Benoit, were found dead in their homes. Um, when the news was discovered, again because police are only saying so much at the time, WWE held a tribute show with no audience, which is now the norm for WWE. Um, and with I would later discover during the last hour of the show, I want to say like around 10:45, they're about to wrap up the show. Um, WWE gets the call that it was a murder suicide, at least from the investigators, that this looks to be a murder suicide, and it looks like Chris Benoit took the lives of his wife and his child, and then his own. Um, then from there, like the media kind of the autopsy showed that he had large amounts of
Steroids.
thank you, steroids in his system, and the media spun it into this was roid rage. And I guess I'm just going over the timeline of what happened in the quick version of the fallout. Um, and by mid to late summer, it was discovered that Chris Benoit was suffering from CTE. I can't remember, Lex, maybe you remember off the top of your head what that stands for.
Let me see. CTE. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So
Encephalopathy.
same thing. Encephalopathy.
Okay.
Same thing. Aaron Hernandez ended up getting diagnosed post mortem.
And many football players before them were diagnosed with that. And the way they described it was he died, what I want to say, mid to maybe late 30s. Um, and he had the brain of a 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient, I believe it's pronounced, and might explain some of the things that was going on, which led to these events. In the Dark Side of the Ring show, they covered it. They originally it was supposed to be two parts. They aired it. The season premiere is one long episode, basically. It covered what led to these events, starting with, oh, he was a child. He enjoyed wrestling. He started wrestling. Um, Covered his relationship with his close friend Eddie Guerrero, um, and how it seemed like that was the first domino that would lead to what would end up happening in this tragedy.
Yeah.
Which, if we want to start with there, for me, when Chavo Guerrero, so they interviewed a lot of people, of course. Chavo Guerrero being uh, Eddie Guerrero's nephew, but they grew up. They were close in age, so they were pretty much brothers. Um, Discovering what I never knew, which I don't think a lot of people even knew, unless Chavo told them the story before, was that Eddie Guerrero was still alive when they found him,
I didn't know that either.
and he passed away in Chavo's arms when they found him. Like he
Before we go on, I just want to say that those first two episodes, like emotionally for me, were very nerve wracking because it brought back, the moments where I remember to this day, like the morning I wake up and I hear that Eddie Guerrero died. And Eddie Guerrero is like one of my favorite wrestlers, as well as, yeah, I'm pretty sure both of you guys as well. So I remember crying that morning, like hysterically crying that morning. and it kind of brought me back to that moment.
Well, you know what? Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So I found out. Let's see. It was I found out I was in high school. It was during the day, so it must have been on Monday because I was at school, and yeah, that adds up. Yeah, I was at school. A student told me, and I didn't believe him because I'm in high school. We got the internet. I would have heard about this much sooner than finding out almost like halfway, if not closer to the end of the day. I'm like, there's no way this is true. No, this isn't right. And I go to WWE.com and it's plastered right there on the home screen. And I didn't necessarily, I couldn't process what I was reading because it's wrestling. So it's like, in my mind, I'm like, oh no, this can't be real. This can't. And of course, the times of all these happening, I think it was before, definitely before me and Joey met,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I want to say this was also before me and Lex even met, which was a few months after the Benoit tragedy. So like the only people who knew me at the time would have been like my close friends from high school that I still talk to. Um, I didn't really process it until I'm watching Raw and they're showing I guess what I'll call greatest hits of Eddie Guerrero, like Eddie Guerrero when he had like that truck and started like spraying Big Show with shit out of the hose. Um, his matches, like they would show like clips of his matches with Rey Mysterio, like when they won the tag titles. At the just before it all happened, he and Batista were going through a feud, and like they were going through this thing where it's like, oh, we're friends, we're buddies, you can trust me, even though he just spent the entire summer tormenting his best friend and revealing to the world that his his only son is in fact actually Eddie Guerrero's son that he adopted to he let Rey Mysterio and his family adopt his son. And it's just like what? So like as it's happening, like I didn't even realize it, but I was crying the entire night. And then they're playing this I want to say it was like Three Doors Down song and showing clips from when he was a child from his home movies because they'd done like documentaries while Eddie was still with us and had those clips. So like they were showing these and I'm just like, why is this happening? I cannot. What happened? Um, and of course when we get to the clip where Chris Benoit is like all the wrestlers are saying their piece and saying how much they're gonna miss Eddie. Like they get to Chris Benoit and he's looking back. It's a little weird that they even aired that, but I get why. It was his truth. It was he wanted to say goodbye to his best friend, but he could barely get a sentence out. It felt like.
Yeah, and that's the part of the documentary where I kind of fell apart because it brought me back to that morning of finding out the news, because it was like my heart almost broke as
All
I
over
was
again.
all over again as I was rewatching that
Yeah.
tribute to Eddie, and it's just everything that followed that after is very tragic in the doc, not just in real life but like in the documentary. You know, the long list of events that happened after that. You
Yeah.
know, it's just very like my heart was broken.
How old were you when that happened?
I I know
If
I
you
was in middle
remember.
school.
Yeah.
I was in middle school, so I know that much. I don't
Um,
know the age, but
I was
um,
16. I can't remember what our age difference is now. Actually,
no, I'm 27.
I'm 31. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, so then I would have been 13,
Yeah.
12, 13. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And just at the end of I remember at the end of the tribute show that WWE did, John Cena puts down like Eddie Guerrero's T-shirt with the WWE title, I fucking lost it. Because also earlier in the night, Stephanie had they had shown her video, and she was saying like she had just talked to Eddie, and Eddie was telling her like, Stephanie, believe me, I'm gonna be world champion again. And he was supposed to be wrestling Batista on that episode of SmackDown for the World Heavyweight title. And it's been rumored, some people who would know have said that he actually was going to win the world title that night, which would have made him a one-time WWE champion and a one-time World Heavyweight champion. And even though Eddie Guerrero was a bad guy, I'll boo him at a live show because that's our job. But Eddie Guerrero was my guy. I think that's honestly why our friendship works so well, is because it's like you're a Rey Mysterio guy and I'm an Eddie Guerrero guy.
Yeah.
So like when they go through this in the documentary, especially because the way it's well shot, and they kind of do those what is the word, dramatizations of certain things. Like they showed like they did a dramatization of Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit at the end of WrestleMania 20 holding up the world titles. So they did a dramatization of Chavo finding Eddie in the bathroom as he's passing. I lost it right there. I just lost it. I had to turn it off. I couldn't watch it. At one point, I was going to watch it with Nige, but like it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. She's starting to fall asleep, and I'm like, I put it on. I'm like, I'm turning this off. This isn't a good idea. This is not the kind of thing Nige wants to listen to as she's falling asleep. This is not the kind of thing I want to watch with my girlfriend, because I know I'm going to end up crying. Lex, do you have any memories? Like, I don't know if you were watching at the time or watching closely. Do you have any memories of when Eddie passed?
So, honestly, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I will admit that I was a huge Eddie Guerrero fan, maybe because of, my Latin heritage, so we really didn't have that many wrestlers growing up. We only had Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, the Mexicals.
Psychosis for a time. Yeah. Oh my God, the Mexicals.
How dare you say that?
Did they come in? I want to say they came into the company after Eddie had passed, but still, like in that time frame, like of all the people you had,
no,
we
Eddie
really
was
did
still
all
alive.
agree that
Eddie was still alive, because I remember one of them was having a feud with Eddie and Ray. They were having a feud with Eddie and Ray when Eddie and Ray were still a tag team.
Okay. But it's like easily Ray and Eddie were 1A and 1B. It's just like what day of the week is it? Which one's better?
Yeah.
So it's like, but I feel like because Ray was always the Ricky Steamboat, he was always a good guy. You never saw him as the bad guy. We don't talk about that. That
night never happened. It never happened. Okay.
What happens in Tijuana stays in Tijuana. Okay.
You're talking about that night. I thought you were talking about the Rumble.
No, I knew what he was talking about.
Okay, well,
I knew exactly what he
that
was
night
talking
also
about.
never happened. So.
No, but what was I saying? Yeah, so it's like Eddie Guerrero was like the shining star of like the bad guys, and when he was the good guy, when he like they told his story when he first won the WWE title, it's like he overcame addictions, drugs, alcohol. He lost his whole family. Like one of the things that broke my heart when they talked about it on the documentary was when Eddie was going through his drug troubles. Like he OD'd 3 times. Never knew any of this because again, why would we know that unless they would come out and tell us like they did? And she let him OD. She just walked out of the house with the kids and took them to school. And she, in the documentary, she said, "God, if you're just gonna take them, take them."
I was very upset at that part because
I was
upset to the point where I was kind of angry. Just given the situation, I was like, I understand where she was coming from because she probably had to deal with it, and I've never dealt with anything like that.
Oh
But
no, of course not. Yeah.
God damn, that was one of my heroes growing up, and it's
Yeah.
like you just gotta let him die like that.
And the weird part was, it's like, if you have to pinpoint if you had to put a timestamp on what year this all took place, I would assume it would be like 99, 2000, 2001, because during the invasion storyline in 2001, Chris Benoit had a broken neck. Eddie Guerrero was nowhere to be found, so I assume they talked about this when he won the WWE title, that he was fired because he showed up like clearly under the influence and didn't want to go to rehab or anything about it. As far as I know. So they fired him. He lost his family. Like his wife kicked him out. Vicky kicked him out. It was like they were. I don't know if they actually got divorced, but they were close enough to it that they were. He was not welcome home. He either needs to clean up or never to be seen from again in that family. And he literally lost everything. He hit rock bottom, and he was able to get all that back. Like so after he passed away, like torrenting became a thing. Like I was able to see like the original ROH shows, the first few, and Eddie Guerrero was on some of those, and he actually showed up on. He did 2 shows, and the second one was like his thank you for even being here. And I would later see like matches he did on the indies to like prove to the company that like he's clean, he's sober, and he's got his head back on, but like he had to prove it on the indies basically. And he the fact that he ever did a match in ROH, and he actually showed up to an ROH show with the Intercontinental title because he had been hired back. He'd already agreed to working a date for the company that was announced, so they had to reschedule it. So he showed up as Intercontinental Champion. Like, when I look back at this stuff, that's really cool that he had the opportunity to do that. Kind of a blessing in disguise, if you will, because he got to work with a lot of cool people. One of them being CM Punk. He worked CM Punk in a triple threat match against Rey Mysterio. That's pretty freaking cool. But yeah, when like she said that he OD'd right there on the sofa while she was taking the kids to school, and just take him. It hurt. I'm sure just as much as it did for you. But like at that point, like because my mom has told me stories about her life before I was born, I totally understand why she would say that, what her mentality must have been. But clearly, like the way I see it is every mistake that he ever made was for the best, because it led to him becoming a better person in the end. And they even said it like in the documentary that he was very much like a very religious person. Like I think Chavo mentioned that like he would be standing up naked in the locker room reading scriptures from the Bible. Which, if that was anyone else, would be like, if that were any other wrestler, I'd be sitting there like, boy, you crazy. Like, no, it's Eddie Guerrero. That's 100%. Yep, I can believe it. You know what? I almost kind of want to see it. Just don't show the waist down. That's weird. But just, yeah.
And then you saying that kind of ties everything into, the ending of the podcast, because it's like, he actually gave a Bible to Chris, and them finding a Bible next to his son and his wife. It's kind of like it's kind of like a device of foreshadowing.
So this is going to be really long, and there's a discussion that Lex wants to get into.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't seen the Darkside of the Ring documentary on Chris Benoit, both parts 1 and 2 are on YouTube for free to view at your leisure. If you are a wrestling fan or even someone who enjoys true crime shows, this is 100% worth watching. They do get into some Tough stuff. Not with the tragedy, but the fallout. His surviving son has a really touching moment with a member of Nancy Benoit's family. That would be Chris's wife. Her sister was finally able to speak to his surviving son, and like that moment, I'm sure for you, like I broke down a little bit because it was just like you've been cut off from that part of the family since it happened. It's been 13 years, and you finally get to see someone who's been through it, just like you have, just couldn't see or talk to them or just get any closure about it.
And it's a shame because
What was that?
it's a shame because Daniel had absolutely nothing to do with that, but as a ramification of Chris Benoit's alleged actions.
Oh Lord, he did that on purpose. He did that on purpose. So I've discovered, as we were talking earlier. So again, watch Darkside of the Ring. Now we're getting into something they didn't talk about on the show at all. I was listening to a podcast earlier today where the showrunners were being interviewed, and they did film some stuff talking about what's the word I'm looking for? Conspiracy theories. There we go. Conspiracy theories. They did film some stuff, but it was cut for time, and they basically boiled it down to: we'd explain these theories, giving them any kind of attention and any kind of oxygen would be fanning the flames, and they've seen the police reports, they've seen the investigation stuff. Like these conspiracy theories aren't true, but our friend Lex knows how to push my buttons. But he genuinely believes some of this stuff, so I'll give him a minute to say his piece.
Right.
I mean, as a disclaimer, I would like to state that growing up, Chris Benoit was, and in a weird way, still is my favorite wrestler. When he won the Royal Rumble back in, was it 03 or 04? I actually did jump up with joy, thinking, man, somebody of Benoit's tenacity and height, overcoming the odds and winning the Rumble, it meant a lot to me.
Starting from number 1,
yeah,
going to the
like
end, eliminating the Big Show. That's cool.
Like the story that WWE told using Benoit as like a vehicle, it was nothing short of amazing, considering that WWE has a reputation of being the land of giants.
Yeah.
And then for Benoit not only to win the Royal Rumble as the first, overall entry, to take down both Triple H and Shawn Michaels in a triple threat match, both at WrestleMania and the following pitting Triple H, and the following pay-per-view at Backlash pinning Shawn Michaels, essentially cementing his.
Yeah, did he made Trips tap?
No, at Backlash he made Shawn Michaels tap. I want to say to the sharpshooter,
which is touching considering Bret Hart and all that.
Yeah, and it was in Canada. I mean,
and so I mean, growing up, Chris Benoit was my hero.
And I will say, like, before all this stuff went down, Joey, let me know if I'm wrong. We could easily say we all love Benoit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like he was an amazing wrestler. Like, I
The
was
flying
watching
headbutt
back.
was like the best thing he did, in my opinion. Like growing up, the flying headbutt was like the coolest thing.
That was cool. He was spread eagle, flying off top of a rope, hitting a guy with his head.
To this day, I can still hear Michael Cole going, "The Rabbit Wolverine."
On SmackDown, right?
Right, exactly.
Like
I
we all
remember
love
him
Chris
tapping
Benoit.
out. I think it was Carlito in like 5 seconds.
Was
in
it
like
Carlito
a couple
or
matches.
Orlando Jordan?
It might have been Orlando Jordan.
I remember after he won the title, like that summer, I went to a Raw house show, and the main event was Chris Benoit defending the world title against Triple H and Kane. And funny little tidbit: when Triple H came out, him and Kane, like they have the spotlights. They have like different colors every so often. For some reason, for Kane and Triple H, they had a pink spotlight. I don't know what. They're just really funny to me. It's just like that sticks out in my mind. And also this Puerto Rican dude who was sitting like a row ahead of us, he was stinking up a storm the entire night. That's all I remember about that show. The main event, and there's a dude who was stinking up the entire show for us. But I digress.
Where the hell did we leave off?
You were saying how
Really
Chris
interrupted.
Benoit is your hero.
All right. So, the moment I heard the news of that, Chris Benoit allegedly killed the whole murder-suicide, it actually kind of hurt me. I wasn't...
Wait. Did you hear about him passing away first, then the murder-suicide? Or did you find out all about that stuff, like, at once?
So pretty much I tuned into, Raw, like the following after the pay-per-view. What was the name of the pay-per-view that he was supposed to be wrestling at?
Vengeance,
Was it like
Night of Champions. He was supposed to face CM Punk for the ECW World Title.
And he was scheduled to win the title at that night, right?
He was going to win the title that night. That spot would end up going to John Morrison. Yeah.
And when I heard that, I just couldn't believe it. I saw the tribute show as I'm assuming Dan and Joe both did, and when I heard that Chris Benoit, passed away, I lost. I'm like, what the hell?
Can we take a second? Who do you remember who told you or how you found out
about what?
About Benoit passing?
Oh, I saw it. I saw it on WWE.com.
Okay.
And and then pretty much the show confirmed it.
Joey,
when they had the.
I remember the same way I found out that Eddie Guerrero passed away on the news, because the news, like Channel 5, was talking about it, and it was similar to how Eddie passed, because they were saying how he was like a great wrestler and whatnot, and then he passed.
So I kind of have this. So the person who told me Eddie Guerrero passed away was the exact same person that told me Chris Benoit passed away. That sticks out to me because it's like those are two of my favorite wrestlers. Eddie obviously being the top favorite, but the fact that like just nearly 2 years, almost 2 years, a year and a half later, that Eddie Guerrero's best friend Chris Benoit dies, and it's the same person that tells me. Looking back, that breaks my heart because it's just like, what the? Because I remember when he told me, I look at him like, you're fucking with me, right? He's like, no, why are we fucking you about this? And I'm just like, I'm asking you if you're fucking with me because you're the one who told me Eddie Guerrero passed away. You were the first person that told me. And yeah, I just want to take a minute to see like if everyone remembers that day. Like I remember at that point I was just kind of like, what the fuck's going on? But again, I'm sorry for interjecting, Alex, as you were. Lex, sorry, as you were. I do this a lot, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, he does.
I'm not sorry. Fuck you both.
Yeah, I know. I was just about to say that.
So, anyways, yeah. So once the news was announced that Chris Benoit died, I just didn't know how to process this. It's like hearing. I mean, it was hearing my hero, die. So it was rough because it was also around that time that once Chris Benoit died and once Eddie Guerrero died, I really didn't have any reason to continue watching wrestling, or at least following it as heavy as I used to, because both your heroes passing away, it's just kind of hard to continue on.
Yeah.
Anyways, eventually we started hearing more and more information about what went down at the Benoit's residence, and it just started getting a lot darker. I think, what was it? The rumor has it that they were already aware that how bloody and vicious the killings were when they did the broadcast? Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is Bruce Pritchard, who was high enough in the food chain at WWE, uh, came and said on his podcast that like they WWE wasn't made aware of how brutal the killings were and what exactly happened until near the end of the tribute show. Like they were already fucked.
Yeah.
What were they gonna do for the last 15 minutes? Say like, well, he killed
Everything
everyone.
you just watched was a lie.
Yeah. So like, obviously the next night, Vince McMahon opened ECW, changed the opening theme song to ECW at that too, because the previous song was "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor."
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Right. Yeah, they changed that real fast. Vince McMahon just by himself on camera said, less than 24 hours later, we all know what happened. Outside of my mention of him, you will not be hearing his name going forward, which is the right decision to make. As you were.
Anyways, yeah. I mean, eventually, for the most part, what was it? The general consensus, or not general consensus, but the. Actually, could you go ahead and just explain what was revealed, like what the shocking, gruesome news was in regards to what happened?
The news that everyone had heard by the next morning, nationwide, was that it was a murder-suicide, that Chris Benoit took the lives of both his wife and his son before taking his own over the span of 3 days.
Yeah, and I wish it was that was just it, because then like even though it's weird me saying that that's humane compared to what actually happened, it makes it look humane, you know.
In terms of like, oh, they all passed.
No, in terms of
Yeah.
like he committed a murder suicide, but how it actually went down was inhumane, you know. Like I said, I wish all that information never came out. I was like how like the events leading up to him killing his wife and then his son, and then how the documentary goes into like how he searched how to like resurrect like a dead body or something like that. Like all that is very dark, and I wish none of that ever happened. I wish it would just like, oh, murder suicide and that's that. No other information came out, because you know that obviously taints the little respect anyone ever had for Chris Benoit the wrestler, you know.
Yeah, a lot of that information. Like, Lex, you haven't seen the documentary, but they reveal with a crime scene photo, and when you see it, you'll see that they did a very they skirt the line a lot of like what's tasteful, what's distasteful. Like, they showed aerial shots of the home with the police there, and they didn't. They showed you picture crime scene photos, but they showed you crime scene photos that were very much like there's not a lot going on in this picture, but to give you an idea of what the home looked like. And the one that, of course, I'm sure the same for Joey, that kind of brought us to like a shock, was that there was a knife underneath the bed of his son.
Yeah.
So that they didn't say how he took their lives. But of course, if you wanted to, you could look up that information quite easily.
Well, they did though. At least his son, they did.
It was a 2-hour thing, and I easily could have missed that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to spoil it for Lex's sake, but they did share how he took his own life and how he took his son's life. I'm not sure if they said how he took his wife's, but
yeah, because he was it at one point. He apparently or allegedly put his son into a crossface, right?
No.
So, wait, all right. So that is no longer the case.
No, that wasn't.
That was factually never the case. Uh, let me look this up.
So what? I'm just gonna say it. So
All right, go for it.
he basically force fed his son some kind of drug, like a
Oh,
painkiller, like a painkiller.
no, it was a combination of like Xanax and
Yeah,
pain
Oh yeah, to
medication.
subdue him,
yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
And then he suffocated like while he was in his bed, face down. The old pillow, put the pillow on the back of his head and just push down, suffocate him to death. And that's how he killed his son.
Um, I can't. It's honestly, as we're talking about this, it's fucking with my head. Like that we're talking about. It's just whoo, yeah. The same for Nancy, hydrocortisone, which is basically a painkiller, and alpraz. Oh, an anxiety medication. So pain medication mixed with anxiety medication at a high level. So he did the same for both of them. He drugged them both. But yeah, yeah, I remember at the time that like, and because of course the internet is the internet, and they don't wait for facts. I remember reading online like people were saying like, oh, he choked his son to death. Some people were saying that he put his son in the crippler crossface, which was his finishing move. For those who may not know, his finishing move was a submission called the crippler crossface. And I remember reading that at the time and just not believing it because it's just like there's so much information going around. Like the media are just trying to stir it as like a roid rage incident, but roid rage is maybe like a couple of moments where this took place over a planned out course of 3 days. Yeah. Um, Lex, back to you.
yeah. So, like I said, I wish my memory of the entire incident was fresh, and I used to. I didn't fully read the police report, or at least not that I could seem to recall.
Mm-hmm.
But I know. I mean, there are rumors and alleged conspiracies of regarding a certain wrestler called Kevin Sullivan being involved in the killings of Nancy, Chris, and is it David, right?
That
What-
that
What's the name? What's the name of the son? The other son?
the son that passed away was Daniel Benoit.
Daniel. Yeah, there we go. Daniel. All right. Yeah. So I mean, it's just the fact that was it. Chris Benoit ended up hanging himself from using one of the cords from one of his equipment.
Yeah, he wrapped his throat around basically a rope from his gym equipment, but it was like a weight machine.
Yeah,
So he
and
wrapped
that
the
was on
cord around
Sunday.
it. Yeah, I believe
'Cause
so.
Because the idea was that he killed each member of his family and himself on different days, right?
Yeah,
Nancy on Friday, Daniel on
think
Saturday.
more or less, yeah. Benoit used a weight machine cord to hang himself by creating a noose from the end of the cord on a pull-down machine from which the bar had been removed. Benoit released the weights, causing his strangulation, and it was about 245 pounds that he had set the weight to. That pretty much took him off the floor.
Yeah, no, there's no surviving that. That's he. They said in the documentary he was trying to look up like the quickest way to kill himself. Like that was like quick and painless.
He had researched the quickest and easiest way to break a neck. Yeah. Apparently,
I do have a couple questions though. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do it so much though. I just wanted to put this out there that
Oh yeah.
in Nancy's sister Sandra clarified some details back in 2016. She said that over the weekend after the murders, the search history on Chris Benoit's computer showed he had researched the quickest and easiest way to break a neck. He had then later used a towel around his neck attached to the handle of the machine, which he pulled down using a very heavy weight and let go, breaking his neck instantly.
Yeah, it's
Damn, shit got.
kind of a tough pill to swallow. No pun intended, of course.
Wow.
Shit,
You didn't mean it. I
dark,
know you
really.
didn't
I
mean
didn't.
it.
I just it just hit my head. I was like, wow, did I really just say that?
Honestly, you know what? Lex has done worse. I told him a friend of mine had passed away due to an overdose of heroin that was mixed with something else, and he had, because it's him, he made a joke using that same thing, and I kind of had to forgive him because he didn't mean it. It was just the first thing that came out of his mouth because it was on his brain. It was right there on the tip of his tongue.
I lied.
But yes, as you were, Alex,
Fuck. What the hell did
you
we
you
leave
stopped
off?
on like he choked his son out to death.
Right. So what was the that was the original rumor that he ended up putting his son in a crossface,
Yes,
um, as a means of torturing him.
yes.
Yeah, and then you were getting to Kevin Sullivan.
Oh, we can we'll get to that later. But I did wanted to see if they actually did break down regarding the random texts that Chris Benoit did send out to Chavo Guerrero amongst other wrestlers.
They did.
They
Yes,
did. Okay.
Chavo said text message read something to the effect of the dogs
Like
are
the
locked
dogs.
up back. Um, the back door is also open, I believe, or one of the doors are unlocked.
Yeah. And he sent that through his phone and Nancy's phone.
Yeah,
The same message.
I mean, so I guess should we just start? You know,
just dive into
jump. Yeah, just dive into it.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So go on, Dan. Bring up the theory that's circulating on the interwebs.
No, you tell me because I haven't read it.
All right. So the idea being, what was the Kevin Sullivan's previous gimmick back in WCW?
So this is actually goes back to the mid to late 80s. His gimmick was that he was a Satanist, and they actually showed images of what this look was, and it was literally face painted mascara, and he just wore black. And there's a lot more to being Satanist than that, but go ahead. I'll stop.
No. Go on. Like, but it continue on up until his time in WCW, right?
Oh, okay.
Because
Yes. So he had that gimmick on and off in all through WCW. It went from being Satanist to being like
the Fallen Angel.
Nancy, when she ended up going out with Kevin, she was her nickname as the valet was the Fallen Angel. Again, this is what we learned in the Darkside of the Ring documentary. They both ended up going to WCW together, and he would end up booking for WCW. Booking meaning he was writing the storylines and bringing in talent to put in those storylines, basically. When Nancy went with him to WCW, she was no longer his valet. She was no longer the Fallen Angel. She was just known as Woman. Very much a like. I think they showed one of her promos where she was trying to get Ric Flair to hire her. Basically, it's like women, men, you want me, women, you want to be me. Kind of Sable-esque, if you will.
Pretty much.
But more like think dressing like Miss Elizabeth-esque a little bit, just a little more revealing. By revealing, I mean she had cleavage. Miss Elizabeth wouldn't dare. Things like that. So she was no longer associated with Kevin Sullivan on TV, but they were very much, in fact, married. Up until, I want to say 1997, Kevin Sullivan had booked an angle meaning the storyline, where Chris had lured away Nancy from Kevin, and they did this shooting like different vignettes, promos of the two of them together, but to really sell the angle or to push the angle on TV to make it seem very believable, they even roomed together a lot to make it to appear that the people who would know better that this is in fact a real life situation going on. There's there's a joke that Nancy's sister had mentioned that like, oh, it seemed like Kevin Sullivan had booked his own divorce. Um, and it was very funny at the time, but then as time went on, it became very less funny. So Nancy would end up really leaving him during this feud. And there was a match, I want to say it was Bash at the Beach 1997, where they had like this. I can't remember if it was it was just basically no DQ, anything goes. I think falls count anywhere. And the match started out professional, but it quickly wasn't anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could see they were throwing haymakers, and by that I mean in pro wrestling, you want to make it look like you're hurting your opponent when you in fact aren't, or aren't going out of your way to injure them. That's the art of professional wrestling. You make it look like it hurts, and it doesn't hurt as much as you think, or it hurts more than you think sometimes. But yeah, they went out of their way to severely hurt one another. They broke things over each other's faces, which is normal in pro wrestling. If you're just watching a match, like, wow, these two really look like they hate each other. No, they legitimately hate each other. Nancy would leave leave Kevin Sullivan for Chris Benoit. In the Darkside of the Ring documentary, they revealed something I never knew. Joey, I don't know if you knew either or not. It was revealed that the reason that Nancy would actually leave Kevin is that Kevin was abusing her, physically abusing her.
So I had no knowledge of this whole storyline at all. So, you know.
I'll be honest. I didn't really know about the storyline until like I saw that WWE had released a Chris Benoit documentary after he had won the title, and they kind of tiptoed around it and saying, "Oh yeah, we had this feud. His wife left him for me, but we were very professional because it's a WWE released documentary. They can't really go out of their way and say, oh, we beat the fuck out of each other.' Like he had said like, oh, it's very professional, blah blah blah, and they kind of just scooped around it. And like I would later find out before he had passed that like, oh, there was this real life drama, and his wife would leave. Kevin's wife would leave him for Chris. Chris Benoit would later leave WCW because Kevin Sullivan had been removed as the head booker, and they were bringing him back into that position. And Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn left together to the WWE. And the main reason Chris left was because he was not going to get a fair shake in WCW if Kevin Sullivan was running the show. That's fair because, again, Nancy left Kevin for Chris. But yeah, it was revealed in the documentary. It was revealed in the documentary that she was being physically abused. They didn't talk about whether or not it was also verbal, but you have to imagine it was both physical and verbal abuse. You were gonna say, Lex?
So as I say, that's one of those classic moments of where life imitates art, or art imitates life, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much. And they went into some information that like Dean Malenko's wife, again, didn't know this before, was a therapist, and Nancy was seeing her for therapy. One day she showed up to her office, and she was wearing sunglasses. Chris had taken her to this therapy session as well. Nancy takes off the sunglasses, and she has a big black eye. This would be like the big push for Nancy to leave Kevin. Again, that all goes down. Chris leaves. Nancy leaves the company as well. Before that, Chris and Eddie and Perry and Dean Malenko, they all leave WCW together January 2000 and join WWE like a week later. And that's where the end of like the Kevin Sullivan drama was. Or so Lex thinks. Or so they want us to think, and Lex thinks otherwise.
Yeah.
So, well, let me ask you this before I can go further.
Yeah.
Joe, I did send Dan a clip from YouTube. I'm not sure if we're allowed to play that on the podcast at all.
I would say no.
We can link people to it, and
yeah, I could put a link in the description.
And because we're gonna edit this, if you want to like listen to it just to go over it really quick, so that way you can give it to us fresh, feel free.
All right, let me just. So there's a video on YouTube where I believe Ern Anderson actually calls it an audible, as a way of like breaking the fourth wall, forewarning Chris that what he's doing is wrong, and that it is possible that Kevin Sullivan, Ern Anderson, out of respect for both Chris Benoit and Kevin Sullivan, warns Chris Benoit of what he's doing. Essentially, he's
WCW's valuable time. I never asked for it.
Pretty much, he says, what she's doing with woman is wrong. The fact that he's in Germany or something with her on a Prompt or whatever. The fact that he's essentially destroying and ruining the family life of Kevin Sullivan.
Being a homewrecker, yeah.
Yeah, essentially being a homewrecker. I do believe that Ern Anderson, out of respect and as a warning to Chris Benoit, called it an audible, and had this promo played. I think of it as like breaking the fourth wall. To us, it's just part of
part of the show. But to those who know, this is him calling it a shoot, or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I know exactly what interview you're talking about because you played the clip, and I remember the clip now.
Yep.
And that was one of those things that they were saying it's a shoot, but it was to get over on the people, the hardcore fans like you and I, who know these terms and who understands that everything you see on TV is a script, basically. It's scripted. So to get one over on us, the hardcore fans who know these terms, they will sometimes say things like calling audible or saying they're going to shoot from the hip. Those are like key words and key phrases to get over on the hardcore fans, because hardcore fans are, no matter what you're a fan of, if you're a hardcore fan who reads all the backstage drama of whatever you're into, if, especially in wrestling, if you know the words and you know how everything kind of works-ish, by kind of works-ish, I mean like how everything works on TV. Like, okay, Stone Cold Steve Austin did not hate Vince McMahon. In fact, he loves Vince McMahon. He made Vince McMahon a whole lot of money, and Vince McMahon made him a whole lot of money too.
And but here's the thing, I do believe this is one of these cases that he was warning him, because he uses what I believe is like key words or trigger words as a way of saying, hey, Benoit, this is legit. Like, this is not storyline. And I'm only saying this as a way of like, relieving my conscience because I know what's about to happen.
To a certain degree, I can see that being him being honest, because while he's giving that promo, there really is drama going on in that family now because of all of this that's going on. But I believe, how does that promo end? With him saying, be careful what you wish for?
No. Here, let me see if I can find the exact wording.
Okay.
Away from this great sport, or whether you limp away, or whether they roll you away in a wheelchair, the one constant will always be in your life is your family. They're there. They pat you up when you're hurt. They prop you up. They build your ego up, and they send you back out that door. Well, Chris, I'm just going to ask you one time. Is this obsession with destroying every aspect of Kevin Sullivan's life worth losing your soul?
So, all right, so this is how it ends.
When you're hurt, they prop you up, they build your ego up, and they send you back out that door. Well, Chris, I'm just going to ask you one.
All right, so I'm going to see if I can say verbatim what he says.
Send you back out that door.
So, Chris.
I'm just going to ask you one time.
I'm going to just ask you one time.
Is this obsession
with
destroying every aspect of Kevin Sullivan's life worth losing your soul?
Worth losing your soul, and that's how WCW ends.
So
I do.
Obviously, looking back, that doesn't sound so good. But
No. I mean, it's also considering the fact that with Kevin Sullivan alleged ties with Satanism, whether or not he actually practices it at home, I do believe he has stated in interviews he's aware of Satanism, but he has practiced in the past.
Well, again, this is going on based off of the fact that it's wrestling, and he actually didn't do an interview for Darkside of the Ring. He just wanted no part of it, especially for this episode. He wanted no part of that. It's been said that, how do I put this? He dabbled, but that's just to gather info for his gimmick that was Satanist. So if when he started doing this in the 80s, that was a time where it's if someone asked you, hey, is wrestling fake? You put them in a hospital, or you hurt them. So I can see him dabbling in that just to have an understanding of this is what Satanism is, blah blah blah. Just so he has a way to present it to the crowd and on TV. But I would never say he practiced it.
Because I would also say, because it's I'm just basing this off the information that I know about Satanism, that they do practice absolutely brutal killings, and not just I mean, hell, even there are alleged rumors that gangs like MS-13 are also Satan worshippers because they throw the devil horns and all that. But I do believe that the brutal killings that were described in the police report of the Ben Watts incident is essentially a ritualistic murder that took place.
You're doing this from memory, right?
Yeah.
You don't happen to remember what you read at the time, in terms of what was in the police report at the time?
No, but I just remembered that what was it, Nancy? No, but I mean the way to describe the killings was brutal, right? It was bloody, right?
It was what?
Or, Nancy, it was bloody, right?
No, it wasn't.
No.
No.
Well, I'm also basing on the fact that there are wrestlers on record. You can look up online, stated that they do not believe that Chris Benoit killed his family. One wrestler in particular is Hornswoggle. If you look up wrestling YouTube shoot.
Yeah.
What's the name? Yeah.
I think I've seen that one before. And
there are wrestlers within
I think
the
that's one of those things where they mention a lot in the episode that they were even showing home video clips he was a loving father.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's the person they saw at work, but especially after Eddie passed away, so
he wasn't the same.
He wasn't, we all know that for a fact. He wasn't the same. In the episode they mentioned that Chris and Nancy both stayed with Vicky for a month or two after Eddie had passed. At one point, someone was complaining that Mom, Chris is crying in your bed again, and she goes in there and Chris is crying on the side of the bed where Eddie would have slept, crying into his pillow. Clearly he was a mess after that happened. And it took a long time for them to find a place where he can get his feelings out, because he kept everything so bottled up, a lot of us do, I'm sure. But to the point where it clearly to everyone it was unhealthy. They gave him a journal, and that started bringing him out again a bit. But he was never the same. I think I don't think they actually talked about what was in the journals, because I'm sure there's some messed up stuff in there. Just that
all they said was it was letters to Eddie.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I don't believe Chris Benoit isn't fully capable of killing his family. He most certainly was, due to the fact that he, given his condition, given to the fact that he was diagnosed with CTE, he is a known he has a known history of abusing steroids. He has all the tall tale signs of somebody who would have like a very short and vicious temper. All things considered.
And then they also have like the text records between him and Nancy.
So I do believe that there was trouble in paradise back at home, and that
they did mention that actually in the documentary as well. Like they mentioned that like Chris was also abusing Nancy in that last year. At least it seemed like in the documentary. They didn't say when.
At least verbally.
No, I believe the sister, like Nancy's sister, like mentioned like she actually hit him.
That she hit him or he hit her?
Oh, sorry, that he hit her. Sorry.
So I don't believe it's not. Like I said, I do not believe it's not out of the realm of possibility that Chris Benoit really did murder his entire family. But like I said, it's hard for me not to considering the fact that the wrestlers know better than we do, because they interacted with Benoit on a near daily basis. They all travel together and whatnot. But for them, for a good amount, I mean, there are some wrestlers who avoid the topic entirely, like Chris Jericho.
Chris has actually done podcasts about it. Like he interviewed Nancy's sister in 2016.
Well, he's also a big part of that documentary too. Like at least half of that documentary is Chris Jericho.
He mentioned even like at the beginning of the episode, it's like if you're one of those people who are just going to give me shit and say I'm glorifying a murderer, just turn this off.
Yeah, because I mean, I hate to say it, but Chris Benoit is a huge part of Chris Jericho's life and career.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing he can do about, avoid that.
Yeah.
I mean, they were both Canadians, Canadian wrestlers, and they both had the first name Chris.
If you want to know more about like the relationship between Jericho and Benoit, I would definitely read Jericho's first book, A Lion's Tale. Really good book.
Like I said, I'm not saying that, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Chris Benoit did kill his family. I'm not. Like I said, there's a lot of evidence to prove otherwise that he's there's a lot of, stories backstage saying that he's a very demanding and physical person, essentially serving as being a huge part of the hazing hazing a lot of the rookies.
Oh my God, I remember one off the top. Well, not a hazing, but I remember a weird Chris Benoit story off the top of my head. In Hardcore Holly's book, he mentioned that Chris had this loud laugh anytime someone was throwing up. And it wasn't like, oh, that's kind of funny. No, he was like hysterically laughing that someone was throwing up. And it's just like, that's not normal, but he wasn't a normal person really to begin with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have that much tenacity, 24/7, I mean, he wouldn't be normal either.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like I said, it is not out of the realm of possibility that he is, like I said, he is fully capable. Like, he could have probably murdered all three of us, like, no problem.
Oh, 100%. At the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess part of me is holding out, holding out hope that your hero is not a fucking killer. And that's me in my case.
I can totally understand that. I can't really fault you for that. It sucks because I'll tell you right now, if it had turned out that if the roles were reversed, that it turned out Eddie Guerrero was the murderer, I would be holding out hope deep inside that maybe one day someone will come forward and it turns out it wasn't him. Mm-hmm. It was in fact this other person or these other people. So I can't fault you for hoping that one day something will change and maybe not. We'll come to a place that his name isn't sullied because I'm hoping there comes a time where like his surviving son can be a part of wrestling without people giving him shit just because he's alive and his last name is Benoit.
Like the stigma of the Benoit name will never like. I do agree with WWE's move of like essentially wiping the slate clean of the Benoit name just because of the negative, you know, the
The
negative
negative
presence.
feelings and connotation that it brings.
Yeah, so I'm totally, until otherwise, until proven otherwise, yeah, they're making the right decision of essentially wiping out his name since it's their universe, it's their business.
Yeah. And again, the way I've heard it, like actually from CM Punk, is the reason they don't bring him up or just name drop him is because to do that is to promote him. To promote him is to say what he did was okay. And that's a very weird thing when in wrestling, a lot of wrestlers have done a lot of fucked up stuff. But I will give them credit in that they're drawing the line right there at you murder your family, you're never going to be heard from again. You're never going to hear this name ever again.
And it's not like they're Benoit's killing is the first incident of murdering in wrestling. We have the alleged case. Oh, actually, I think Jimmy Snuka has already been tried and found guilty of the murders back in the 80s, right?
No,
No?
He was acquitted.
He was a suspect when it originally happened, but it became a cold case, and like after his book came out near the end of his life, they tried to put him on trial, but he didn't have all his faculties near the end of his life when they were trying to do this, and they weren't actually able to move forward with a trial, and then he passed away. So it was one of those things where it's like, because of where that stands, and because Jimmy Snuka isn't as big a name at the time when they were trying to try him, not a lot of people were saying a lot of things. Like, there was a vocal minority for sure, but you weren't hearing it on the news. So it wasn't something WWE really had to worry about. And then he passed away, and it was just like, it sucks that if he did do it, and based on allegedly what he wrote in his book, I've never read his book. I don't know what it said, but the fact that he had something in his book enough that they tried to bring him up on charges says a lot. And if he did do it, it sucks that that woman her family will never see justice. Because they couldn't bring him up on charges, they couldn't try him.
So I'll just say this much. I wish I had enough information. I read more into like the police report and the incident of what happened at the Benoit residence. I don't have enough information, so I don't feel comfortable enough, putting up an argument for it, just because I don't want to spread, fake news and whatnot. And I'm really just holding out hope, like I stated earlier, that Benoit's innocent in all this, because you don't want any of your heroes to be known as a murderer.
I'll tell you right now that I never really knew you felt that way. For a long time, I thought you were just putting up a stink to fuck with me, honestly.
I mean, part of it, yeah.
It didn't hurt your case, really, to just fuck with me. But honestly, I didn't know that's how deep you felt about it.
Yeah,
and to that point, I completely sympathize and understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, like I said, for me, Benoit pretty much was the embodiment how I view myself, I'm not exactly the tallest person in the world. I'm only, 5'7"?
On a good day.
Fuck you. I'm actually 5'7". Yeah, no, like I said, to me, it's just like, it's just finding out that your hero, like, murdering someone, even if it wasn't intentional. Kind of like with the whole Rey Mysterio incident over in Mexico.
Yeah.
And, it's a tough pill to swallow knowing that your hero, will go down, not for his accolades or his, what he did as a performer. He will go down for the rest of his life as a murderer. That everything he accomplished in the ring, as staged as it is,
didn't matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anymore, at least. That I get. Honestly, like for a split second, I was gonna say, like, are you saying we spent an extra hour of our time listening to this bullshit? But like, no, honestly, I feel like now, I kind of understand where you're coming from better, like I said, and appreciate you starting to push my buttons. But like, no, you weren't intentionally pushing my buttons. It was just a plus
Like,
for you.
I feel where Lex is coming from, because, like, I guess keep referring to the documentary where everyone was saying, like, Chris Benoit easily, if this whole tragedy never happened, he would have went down as like the best in-ring performer of all time, or one of the best in-ring performers of all time. That's just how good he was.
We would be
And
talking him in the same vein as Bret Hart, Kurt Angle, Dynamite Kid, like William
I'm
Regal.
thinking, yeah, exactly. And, you know, I feel for Lex, because it's like, in the back of my mind, I kind of have that hope as well, that his name could get cleared, so that way we can acknowledge how great he was.
And I know, like, in certain contexts where it's like, if it's just you and your buddies talking, and it's like, oh, one of my favorite matches is Chris Benoit versus Chris Jericho in a ladder match of the Royal Rumble.
Oof.
Like, that's cool to talk about. And I hope people can get to a place where they can talk about, like, their favorite matches that he just happens to be a part of, and be okay with that a little bit, but like knowing it's like, hey, we're not going out of our way to praise him. We're just praising moments that we experienced watching on television.
Like,
Especially like since we watched it as kids, it's like, oh, this was cool.
I mean,
I remember
based
this
on
being a
everything
moment.
that's happened, I have been able to separate the artist from the person. Like, I respect Chris Benoit for the artist that he was, you know, for the performer that he was. Even if he probably was, in the last few days of his, you know, life, a terrible terrible individual who probably did end up murdering his family and offing himself in order to, you know, not face justice.
Yeah.
But like I said, I still hold out hope that one day, you know, maybe something will pop up. Like, yeah, by the way, Chris Benoit's Exalt, you know, is free of, you know, all the crimes of all the allegations that are, you know, been brought before him, and you know, we could go back to celebrating Chris Benoit, the performer, and the person. Well, mostly the performer. Like, Chris Benoit should be in the WWE Hall of Fame based on his
Yes.
in-ring accomplishments.
Yes.
You know, honestly, again, of course, if it wasn't for what happened the last 3 days of his life, he would have to be in the Hall of Fame just based on like his passion for professional wrestling.
It'd be like unanimous. Like,
yeah, like
first ballot.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've come to a good place where we can call it a night here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would just say, you know, I would definitely, you know, catch up. I definitely do plan on watching the documentary, and I do plan on reading the police report, just so I can get a clearer picture of what went down the last 3 days of Chris Benoit's life. And then hopefully we could do a follow-up of, you know, follow-up and go from there. And I still don't mind playing the devil's advocate and, you know, attempt to defend Chris Benoit's name from a different perspective.
This says the guy blaming the Satanist.
So
I will like to plug in something real quick. If you guys haven't watched it yet, I would highly recommend you guys check out the Tiger King on Netflix.
Oh my goodness.
Oh Jesus Christ.
My god.
just based on the memes, I'm just avoiding it like the plague.
Oh no!
Oh
dude,
wait.
The memes alone made it worth. Like I said, yeah, no, I would definitely recommend checking out Tiger King if you have it on Netflix. It just premiered on March 20th. Yeah.
Oh my!
Well,
This motherfucker used his plug to plug
Well,
Tiger King.
I think that's where we will end it there. Lex, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me,
It's been a
guys.
pleasure.
Thank you for having me, guys.
I know I can speak for Dan. As like I hope you can come back on the show again in the future.
Absolutely.
And that is another episode of the Border Hungry Podcast.
Yeah, call me, beat me if you want to hear me.
Oh my lord! Get him off of here.
All right, we're ending it there.